Now we're going to learn about one of my favorite things in stats, which are box and whisker plots, which I actually like to call box plots. And a box plot is a visual representation of data that is divided into 4 parts or quartiles. Quartile, you can see the word quarter, so it shouldn't surprise you that it's dividing something into 4 parts. And we divide it into 4 parts using 5 points. We use the median, the upper and lower quartiles, and the maximum and the minimum. So if I have something that I want to divide into 4 parts, let's take something and divide it into 4 parts. So here's something I'm going to divide it into 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. And you can see that if I have 5 points, a beginning point and an end point, and then 3 in the middle, that divides something into 4 parts. So in making a box and whisker plot, or a box plot, well, what are the 5 points that we're going to use? How do we find those 5 points in order to make this type of a graph? Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to fix something on the worksheet, because these 2 sets of data are supposed to be the same as this, and they are not. This one has an extra 7 and is missing a 5. So I'm just going to kind of rewrite it here so that they're all the same. So I've rewritten it here, and I've written over here in green the 5 points that we need to find out of this data. So finding the, first of all, remember, if I'm trying to organize this and I know I'm going to use the median, they need to be in order. So my lowest one is over here on the left, and my highest one is over here on the right, just like a number line. So the easy ones to pick out are the minimum, which is 1, and the maximum, which is 10, which, something I might want to know later on, means that my range is the maximum minus the minimum. So my range here of this data is 9. Well, now I need to find the median. So if I want to find the median, I can count how many data items do I have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 data items. And if I divide that by 2, I get 7.5. So that's telling me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Not surprisingly, that one right there, that 5 right there, is right in the middle. So that is my median. Now, the concept of Q1 and Q3, remember we're talking about quartiles. So Q1 stands for, what is the first quartile? Well, if from my minimum to my median represents 50% of the data, Q1 is going to be the dividing line for 25% of the data. So I can see that I have on the lower part of my number line, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 values below the median. So the median of the lower half, so to speak, would be 3. That's the middle spot in between of my lower half. So my Q1, whoa, what happened? Let's come back. Come on. My Q1 is 3. And my Q3, that is the median of my upper half, is going to be 8. So now I have divided all this data into even chunks. Each chunk here represents 25% of the data. So in order to draw my box plot, I'm going to do it the way I like to do it. You can follow step 1, 2, 3, and 4. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. But you're going to have some kind of a number line that determines, so you can see what the scale is of your numbers. So here I've put a number line. And what I like to do is I like to start with my Q1 and my Q3, and you'll see why in a minute. So my Q1 is 3, and I put a line right there at 3. And my Q3 is 8, so I put a line right here at 8. And then what I do, let's make this one a little bit longer, is I connect those lines. And what do you know? I now have a box. Well, I guess technically it's a rectangular box. It's not a square box. Well, but it's a box nonetheless. So now I have my box, and now I go to my median, which is 5. So I make a line here at 5, and now I can see my median. And then I go to my minimum, which is 1, and I might put a little dot there. Actually, I like to use a little line, a little bit smaller than the line for the end of the box. And my maximum, which is 10. And I connect those to the box with a line. And now I have a box plot, which is a really nice graphical representation of how my data is distributed. Now I'm going to introduce a new term here. We know that the distance here from the minimum to the maximum is called the range. But we have another, in many ways, more important distance to think about, and that is the distance from the Q1, so let's identify this as Q1, all the way over here to Q3. This, if you think about it, is the middle 50% of the data. So it's kind of like, it helps us visualize the center of the data much better than, say, the range does. Because the range, I mean, I might have something, you know, like way out here that would make this part really, really long, and the range really isn't giving me very much information. So that one data point out here, which might be an outlier, is kind of distorts the way that the diagram looks. But if I give this distance here between Q1 and Q3 a name, that gives me a much better idea of the center. And that name is the interquartile range, frequently called the IQR. And that is a really good representation of kind of like the spread of the data, because it's giving us the spread of the middle 50% of the data. Well, not surprisingly, we can draw a box plot on our calculator as well. So I opened up my calculator, and I went, I'll show you from the view. This is my calculator. I went to Stat, Edit, because I got to enter the data into the calculator. Well, I see that list 1, 2, and 3 already have data in it. I could clear it. List 4 has data in it. But list 5 is empty. And I don't feel like clearing that other data. So I'm just going to enter all my data here into list 5. So I paused the video and I entered that data into list 5. And now I need to use the calculator to make my calculations. So I'm going to go Stat, Calc. It's a one variable statistic, so I'll press 1. And it's in list 5. I have to identify to the calculator which pieces of data I wanted to analyze. So I'm going to go second, 5. I get L5, and I hit enter. I get all these numbers here. I don't care about the mean. I don't care about any of these other things. It's nice to know that my N is 15, so I have the right number of data items. And then I'm going to scroll down here. And what do I see? I see my minimum is 1. I knew that. That's correct. My Q1 is 3. My median is 5. My Q3 is 8. And my maximum is 10. So I know I have the right numbers. Now I'm going to go, I want to make this into a box plot. I want to see what the box plot looks like. So I'm going to go second, y equals, which is stat plot. So it's I'm telling the calculator, I want to make a statistical graph. I'm going to use plot 1. So because I don't care which one I want to use, but I'm going to use plot 1. So I press enter, and I'm going to turn it on. It's blinking on, so I want it to be on. Now the type of graph I want is a box plot. And I can see that, well, this one right here looks kind of like a box plot, and this one right here looks kind of like a box plot. Well, the first one is a box plot with outliers, and that's the one I most frequently use. But for right now, I'm going to use this one right here, because I just want to give you the sense of the box and whisker plot. So in order to get to that, I can't scroll down. I got to scroll across until I get to it. And now I hit enter. Well, that's good. Now I'm going to scroll down. What list am I going to use? Again, my data is in list 5. So I'm going to go second, 5. The frequency, unless I had another column giving me different frequencies of each of those data items, the frequency is going to be 1. So now I can go zoom. I get this funny little thing come up on the bottom, so I have to go second, quit, and I go zoom 9. I got some other stuff in there too. Well, sometimes this happens. You can see my box plot is there, but then I have a funny line going through there. That's because if I just press my y equals button, I have a formula in the regular part of the graphic calculator. So if I don't want that to show up, I have to clear it out. So now I'm going to go back to zoom 9, and there is a picture of my box plot. If I want to test it and see whether my numbers are correct, I can push the trace button. Now, the trace button is starting me right there. You can see it blinking. And you can see it's also telling me that my median is 5. And I knew that. And I can go backwards. I can say, well, my Q1 is 3. My minimum is 1. I can go the other way. My Q1 is 3. My median is 5. My Q3 is 8. My maximum is 10. So it makes me a nice box plot. Later on, if you take stats, you'll find that box plots are extraordinarily useful when you're comparing two different types of data, two different variables.